The problem is that you outgrow the system.
It's time to forge a bold future. And my guest today is Ankwetta Beatrice Achaleke.
Known for her book series, Africa for Smart Kids. Over 30 years of international experience. First Black woman to stand for parliamentary elections in Austria.
I was very mission driven. When I left Austria, I gave away everything. My house, I left with 2 suitcases.
After 20 years in Europe, breaking barriers, she made a radical decision. It is time for Africa.
I was pushed into becoming
Beatrice's GloBUNTU Transformation Mindset System is helping people and organizations worldwide to unlock their true potential.
You packed your bags after you've been on stage, you've spoke, you supported so many people, you've done so much good work here. I mean, everybody looking from the outside would be like, what does she want? What's she looking for? And some people will be like, oh, she's going to Africa. Huh. But you went. Unapologetically, you went. What made you come to that decision? Because I guess it's not overnight. So how did you realize one day thinking, I need something else? And what made you make that decision?
So thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I am absolutely delighted to be here and to be having this conversation with none other than you, Joana, none other than you, because you have been very pivotal on my journey as well. I don't know if you even realized how much you supported me, but we'll probably come to that. And sometimes that decision becomes easier, that very hard decision, when you realize that some sisters stand behind you, that they got your shoulder, that they got your back, and that you can always go to them and they understand, they don't judge you, and you were one of them. But before it came to that, yes, many people thought like she was very successful in Austria. She has been to places that no one has been before, no Black woman. She has stood for parliamentary elections. She has created organizations. She's run these big conferences. She can speak to anyone. And then all of a sudden, I call it shit happens. I like to be very, very unapologetic about that, because quite often when we are busy doing the things that we do, we are very mission driven. I was very mission driven. I was not out to do business to earn money, but I was trying to create a future where my children and my children's children and the children that look like my children will not have to constantly justify their presence in Austria. So I was out to prepare the society for my children and my great-grandchildren and children that look like them. So it got to the point where even though I was always busy, being busy, and my daughter always had a way of reminding me, you're always very busy, but you never have enough money. And when my bank manager tells me, Mrs. Achaleke, I see you everywhere, but not on your bank account. And when those messages start coming, you know that you're in for trouble if you don't react. I did not pay attention to that. I did not react. So it got to the point where I wasn't able to pick my rent for 2 months in a house that I paid a mortgage for 45,000 euros. And because of 2 months not being able to pick the rent, the landlord came after me with a lawyer and they wanted to evict me, and they stood at my door at 5 o'clock in the morning, even long after I had paid the rent. And so much happened. I said, like, shit happened.
Yes.
And so when I tried to explain it to some people around me, I called some of the ministers and some of the big shots that were around me. I said, hey, trouble is knocking at my door. Is there any way you can assist? And I heard some people say, that's all your fault because you're asking for too much. You've achieved so much in Austria, and yet you keep asking, you keep criticizing the system. And I was like, okay, I hear you. And when people start saying such things, I realized that I had outgrown my environment, because I knew I was just 46. And I thought about my grandmother who could neither read nor write, who did so much in her village. And I thought and some people said, go for social welfare. And I was like, at 46, going for social welfare when life is only just beginning. I mean, what example am I setting for my children?
Yes.
And what would my grandmother say? So I told myself, the problem is that you outgrow the system. You came here to study anyway, so you extended your stay. Now you outgrow the system, you have 2 choices. Either stay stagnate and wallow and be bitter, end up a cynical Black woman in Europe, or pack your 2 suitcases and go back home and where you can still grow.
Yeah.
So I did some soul-searching conversations with me. I needed someone whose shit was bigger than mine. You will excuse my language, but when it happens, you have to say it. I mean, your audience will excuse the language, but we don't mince when things like that happen. So I knew that I needed someone whose shit was bigger than mine. And so I found Nelson Mandela, who was sentenced to death, who never knew that he was ever going to come out from prison. And so I went into an unspoken conversation with him, trying to understand him and trying to get my understanding of his situation to talk me out of my self-pity party. And then I realized I still had friends Mandela did not have. I have a smartphone, a cell phone Mandela did not have. I'm still online. He was not online anywhere. I still have social media. I realized I have so much. I still have my house. I still have my kids. And so I had to sit down and have a serious conversation with my children. I said, listen, if something is going to happen, I'm going to make a very radical decision. And because we have had an open conversation all along, they understood. Even though if you understand, if I tell you what my big boss told me and what my part-time lawyer, my son is my part-time lawyer.
How old were they? How old were they at that time?
He was 12 and he was 13 going to 14.
Okay.
And mind you, he has just been diagnosed with diabetes. And I had no clue about diabetes. And just around that time, one of my kid brothers passed on in the US. And I wasn't able to go home. What I did is I sat on the phone and made phone calls. And I knew that when I'd stopped making the phone calls, I was not going to be able to pick the bill and the phone line was going to be off. I knew, but I had no choice. So there come a time when you're in a situation like that, you just know there's just no way out. And when looking back today, I tell myself, my ancestors were telling me, you have overextended your stay.
Yes.
And because you're not realizing it, we need to let everything crumble around you so that you have no choice but to.
Did you not see it coming? Was there no moment like years before where you felt it, or was it just really this big thing that had to crumble down to wake you up?
I saw it coming, but not in the intensity. So what really brought me down to my knees was the fact that I was running these high-profile diversity conferences. And so I had a main sponsor. And that main sponsor, the last conference that broke my neck was 2013. 2 months before the conference, she canceled the 45,000 euro sponsorship. And I was like, I am definitely not going to let you go with this. I will not cancel the conference because of you, cost what it may. So I went ahead and did the conference. And of course, all the other jobs that I had to do, I had to use it to pay for the vendors for the conference. And that is where the big trouble came from. I don't regret that decision. I don't. I went out of there with my head high. And I think my ancestors are proud of me.
Yes.
But just to wrap that chapter up, sometimes we outgrow our environment and we don't even realize it. And we have all our hands full, but it's not giving us what we have in our hands. It's not giving us what we need. Because it's long obsolete. We've outgrown the space. And so when we don't quit, when we don't give ourselves the permission to make some of those radical decisions, we will stagnate and we will miss our next masterpiece. And I do not want to miss out on my next masterpiece.
Yes. Thank you so much, because this conversation is actually far away, not about regret, but the importance of this conversation is you're not alone. You're a future forger. You're someone that has taken that boat. So there's so many people. It might not be going back to the African continent. It might not be something in this direction of moving, relocating or something. It might be something else in their life. It might be their job that they have defined their whole existence about, I'm an engineer. Everybody knows me. My family's proud and I can sustain my family. But that's not me. But I want something more. But that fear, something needs to happen, So this conversation is really for people that know, they feel, they sense that there is something else out there that I want to do, but I'm too scared to do it. Do I need the world to crumble down on me first? And if it does crumble down on me, am I going to pick up myself, or am I going to like pity myself? So that's why just listening to your story, we basically don't have excuses anymore. we
No,
don't have
and
excuses.
let me tell you, some people make their children their excuses. You say, oh, I couldn't do it because of the
Me.
children. And I see you're a very brave sister. I don't know, but I don't think that you will ever make, you could in a short while, but I don't think you will stick in there, because some people do it for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
And what I say is that when you put the guilt on your children for not having pursued your dreams,
What
you
a
create
load.
a vicious circle. It's
Oh,
a big load on the children. You know, when you keep saying, I would have done this, but if not of the children, I would have done this.
yes.
If not the fact that I was married, whether that is staying in an unhappy marriage, whether it is
Yes.
staying in an unhappy neighborhood, an apartment that is no longer serving you, a job that, you know, that is breaking your neck, you know, before you
Yes.
wake up in the morning, you're like, oh my God, do I have to go back there? So when you use the children, you put a curse on them. Put a curse on them, you put a burden on them, and they will repeat the same thing in their own lives.
Yes.
And then we would have created a vicious circle of depression, a vicious circle of unsatisfied people,
Yes.
a vicious circle of nagging human beings, especially women, right? So when my children and I pushed, when I listened to my daughter tell me, you living and going gave us the permission to do our thing, to be us. And when I took the decision, I said, like, I had three questions in my mind. Because shortly, before I left, someone promised me a job in South Africa. And I did everything, canceled all the contract. 2 months before I left, he said, I changed my mind. And all my friends said, you're going nowhere. You're not going to go. And I said, like, sometimes we give people too much importance in our lives.
Power.
If I don't go, I give him, if I don't go, I give this South African guy too much powers over my life. I would spend my life saying, had he given me the job, I would be in Johannesburg. So I asked myself the question, if my children ever get into a situation like this in future, what would I want them to say mom would have done? Like, what would mom have done? And I said, what importance do I have to give this persons in my life? Austria. If I stayed in Austria, I would have, you know, like Austria is all racist. You know the conversation we have.
Yeah.
The guilt, you know, play the pity card and indulge in self-victimization. So I said, like, is this the conversation that I want to have for the rest of my life? No, definitely not. And I thought, like, staying here, what does it mean for you? You have to go to the social welfare. You have to do this. Is that what you want? Is that really what you want right now? No. Then get the hell out of here.
Yes. and sometimes it could even be the flip reason, in the sense that you might actually be too comfortable. You might be in your so comfortable zone. Everything is really working like how the world expects it to work. But in there, you know that you can do more. You have that urge, that urgency to do more. You have the capability to do more. Like comfort zone, you might have a good job. You might have a good home. You might have good friends and everything working for you. But you know there is more work to be done. You know you want to make a difference. You know you want to create your story in a different way. You know, then sometimes it's then so difficult to let that go. So thinking about what you said, and you now decided to go not to Cameroon, because you were born in Cameroon. So why did you just like divert and go South Africa?
3 reasons. Reason number 1, I didn't have money to go back to Cameroon. When you've been abroad for 20 years and you're going home, you're expected to bring a lot of money, have a car, have a house, and I didn't have any one of those. And I did not want to go become a liability on my family, and I did not want to bring shame upon them, because you'll be a disgrace for them.
And start justifying your presence.
That's right. So that was number 1. You may be surprised about the second reason, though. I thought, like, if I am going to Africa, I want to take my kids to the place where they can see someone who looks like their dad, someone who looks like their mom in public life. And South Africa is that country that has that mixture. Because originally I was going to take my kids with me. It just happened in the last minute that I could not, and then I had to leave them behind. We had all agreed that we will leave. And so that was the second reason I wanted them to be able, in Austria, they used to sing Black people in posters, in all kinds of, with all kinds of negativity, hunger, poverty, and all of that. And I had been to South Africa, and I can see people in public life, Black and white, I thought like, this is the place where I want my kids to grow up in. And the third one, which is not the least one though, was because I had started working on my concept that I called a GloBUNTU mind shift. And because I had that unspoken conversation with Mandela, in my book, you see, I was telling Mandela, I'm coming to your city. I want to put my tiny feet in your big feet. Teach me, learn me, guide me. Show me what I want to be able to transform what looks like my breakdown now into my absolute breakthrough, just like you did coming out of prison. So I needed to go to South Africa to learn more about Ubuntu and to learn more about Mandela, and I'm glad that I did.
And when you landed South Africa, that plane just touched the ground. How did you feel?
It was a very mixture of feelings because I had just left my kids behind. And when you land, you think like, okay, it is definite. This plane is like when you're up in the air, it's like, okay, I'm not yet at destination. Something could still happen. I could still turn back and go to them. Even though deep within your heart, you're not going back. But when it touches down and you like, I'm out, you see Johannesburg, welcome to South Africa. I'm like, okay, goodbye Austria, but where are my kids? So that was where my first confusion. The first 2 days I was like completely disorientated.
Was it like a guilt? Did you feel a kind of
No, it was not guilt. No? It was not guilt. It was just a realization that we're now separated. And I needed those 2 days to reorientate, to say, you're not gonna put yourself in a self-pity again. And I was trying to figure out what kind of conversation am I going to have with the children that doesn't lead them to the space where they keep saying they miss me. And I keep saying, I miss you. And when you say you miss someone, it doesn't really mean that, it's in some cases, it doesn't hurt, especially when you're at such a long distance. With children and mom and children, I didn't want to have that conversation. So when I came out of those 2 days, my kids and I would had another conversation. I think it was our second conversation since I landed. And we agreed that we love each other passionately. We are committed to each other, but we are not attached to each other. We don't want to do attachment, because with attachment comes pain. It comes disappointment, comes jealousy, comes all kinds of things. But if you're able to love without being attached, and I told myself, if something happened in South Africa and I passed on, I want my children to be able to stand on their feet. So in order to do that, I don't have to go with telling them I miss you. I'd rather tell them I'm proud of you. I'm so happy for you. I see how you're doing. I love who you're becoming. So that conversation, so that it gives them some grounding and gives them some level of self-confidence and gives them ownership over the decisions that they will make in their lives.
Wow. Do you know how?
I knew that being in Johannesburg, far away, meant that I couldn't be the mother that I would have wanted to be. So I had to shift my mind to becoming the mother that I could be to them from a distance, which means sometimes just being a listener, not being a mother, sometimes just guiding them, sometimes just letting them teach you life from their perspective. So I needed those 2 days to shift my mind to understand what kind of mother I am going to be from a distance.
Yes. Wow.
You can't be that fixing mother from a distance. You can't. So I had to learn how to trust that my children and my kids' dad will make different decisions that I would have made, but that these decisions are good for them, and that whatever happens, everything will be fine.
Yes.
So those were the things that I needed to figure out within those 2 days that I was kind of confused.
Wow. So I'm just like, I need to digest this, because this is so emotional on different levels and empowering, because one, somehow we've especially women, we have somehow absorbed a rule of what mothering means. right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so much in our minds that if we deviate a bit, maybe even to the best, to the advantage of our family, our children, ourselves, our ecosystem, but it does not fit what we have put in our minds that we should be doing, then it's a drama. So you explaining this really opens up possibilities for so many women that mothering is not about control, it's about trust. It's about so many other things. It's about letting go and trusting, right? And then
and accept that things will not always be done the way you want them done. But trusting that the fact that they're not done the way you want them done doesn't mean that they're done wrong.
Yes. Was that somehow an inspiration for you to start writing books for children and working with children as an author to make them tell their stories? Did that somehow connect?
Not yet.
Okay.
The reason why I started writing books, there were two reasons. Why I was in Austria when I was 36, I had my daughter and I took her to kindergarten. We were living in Brightonford. And this little brat of a kindergarten child, 3 years, came up to me and said, "Oh, how nice that you brown people came to Austria, because if you did not come to our country, you'll be starving in Africa and you'll be living with trees with monkeys on trees," right? In Brightonford, in our village, there is a bila and a tilpung, so you can buy food and eat and you'll not starve. And she looked me straight in the eye, and I was like, completely like, where is this coming from? Where does she get the courage?
Yes, the courage.
In my state of surprise, she says to me like, "Oh, does Africa contribute anything to the world? What does it tell me?" I just was speechless. I could not. And that I carried that with me. And then you will know in Austria, people ask you all kinds of stupid questions.
Yes.
And they were asking my children. So when I told my kid when they were young that one day, my daughter started saying, "You must write books about Africa so that I don't have to answer all the stupid questions all the time."
Make a dictionary.
So when she came to visit me in South Africa in 2016, that was the first visit.
Yeah.
Her friends called her on WhatsApp and they're asking her, "Do you have water to drink? Do you have electricity? Do you have internet? Should we send you food?" And she was like, "Stupid, foolish, you're talking to me on WhatsApp and this is internet." Yeah, and then she turned around to me and said, "Mom, this is time. You have no excuses. You're back in Africa. Write books for kids. Write books about Africa." That was where I got my contract from. In German, you say Auftrag.
Yes.
She pushed me to writing books.
Yes. But sometimes I also think that this direct or indirect of passive confrontation, racist, ignorant confrontations about the African continent, about brown people, people of color, sometimes I think it pushes us to be on a mode of justifying our presence. So you're consistently trying to justify why you're there, why you're brown. Yes, there's water. Yes, there's light and everything. And it came to a point for me where I thought, like, seriously, why should I be teaching you your ignorance? No. I'm investing too much of my energy in that instead of actually following my purpose. So I understand and I appreciate when a younger generation is doing it. But I believe personally that when you get to a certain age after doing it for a while, let the younger generation do it and focus on your purpose, because then they win. Because then you use all your resources and energy to counter them instead of actually developing yourself. And who goes away with the trauma?
You're right, but I think I did not finish my thought with that little brat.
Yes.
So when I moved to Africa, I was like, you could not answer that little brat. So find your answers. Who are you as an African woman? What does Africa contribute to the world? Now you're here and your daughter is telling you write books. So I wrote books first to find answers for me. It was me in search of my identity. It was me in search of my African greatness. It was me in search of my vast heritage that I did not know. I grew up in a colonial system of education. And then we all go to Europe in search of greener pastures. Yes. And the unspoken, the subconscious, in our subconscious mind, we're saying that what we have is not good enough. Good enough is what is abroad. in the
Well,
country of the person
yes.
that colonized and enslaved my ancestors. So I needed to change the paradigm and go for my Africanness. So what does it take to be an African woman? Before I left Austria, I used to say I'm an Austrian from Cameroon. And I used to fight hard when people tell me, when are you going back home? I'm like, are you kidding me? Home is here. And I'm going to die here. I will find my place in the central graveyard. But after I started writing the books, I found myself in a way that wherever I go, I tell people I'm a very, 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 very proud African woman. I don't justify now. I'm just being, because I know that I come from goodness. And my thing, writing the books also, is to pass on what I learned too late, pass it earlier on to the next generation, so that they don't have to go through all that justification, so that they don't have to go all the lack of self-confidence or the lack of self-worth. They don't have to wait until they are my age before they
Yes,
do it.
yes. Yes. Oh my God. This is good. This is good stuff for people to listen to, because there are so many young people that are trying to find their identity. And I remember, like you just said, I was also schooled in a British school, and the secondary school I went to, I remember that you couldn't even speak Pidgin English, not to talk about speaking your own language. It was so bad that my parents, because they wanted us to be very good in school, never spoke, like encouraged us to learn our language. It was from my grandmother. When I was 16, 17, I started learning Edo, my language. And at that time, when I was young with the friends in this British elite school and everything, it was a kind of pride. Like, oh no, you speak the British language, and that's how you should talk. You dare not speak you don't even have another language, And I remember carrying that identity for a long time, right? And when I came to Europe, so my family, they broke up and everything, so reality struck those, so there was nothing elite and rich anymore to enjoy. But when I came to Europe, I now started thinking like, oh wow, we're not even really like celebrated, accepted here. So what's this whole force about, right? How did we come up with this whole curriculum and idea in Nigeria, actually, that the kids must be, taught like this? Literally, we learned Shakespeare, Macbeth. We never really learned anything from the continent, literatures from the continent and everything. And that was for me, like in my early 20s, realizing that in Europe, I felt like it's so late, because the identity of a person really starts getting formed when they're 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. So I really appreciate books for young people, especially in comic forms, encouraging them to write. So thank you so much for going on that journey and making those books and opening it up for young people to actually start tapping into identity. I am so curious about the Ubuntu philosophy. I've been following you, listening to it, and I'm like, I want to know more about it. What is Ubuntu?
Ubuntu, before we go to Ubuntu, I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned about young people and their identity. I'm so proud of my daughter. She knows Africa more than I do now. We just counted that she's traveled many more African countries than I have. And she's still on her bucket list this year to travel many more. And what made me even prouder is today she sat down and she was saying, Mom, I want to organize my retreat and invite, she calls them children of African descent who are coming to Africa for the first time. Take your first identity finding trip. She has coined out some words there, and she's saying she wants to bring them here so that they got to learn about their identity, so they don't have to struggle, because they struggle a whole lot. You are like, they call you Black African, you've never been to Africa, and she is already at her, because she's seen how that makes her grounded, knowing her African identity. She keeps learning all the time about that, and just the fact that she doesn't learn just for herself. She sees it does her good, and now she wants to involve. Her best friend is coming here very soon. And then not only is she happy about that, she wants to engage other young people and bring them here so they can learn about their identity. And that makes me think our children are watching us. It's not very much about what we say to them, but what we do that counts. They watch you. And so we better be careful about what we're doing, not what we're saying. She's seeing me pack my things and go. And she's seeing me struggling to thrive. Sometimes she sends me money. I mean, the little girl that I left behind at 11, and she doesn't say, Mom, you should come back to Europe. That has never come out of her mouth. Instead, she says, I'll come join you.
Yes.
And so it speaks a whole lot. Our children watch us. And so as Black women, as mothers, we got to really, really, really make sure that we match what we're saying with what we're doing. And most of all, make sure that what we're doing is something that will empower our children, because that's what they're looking at, especially when we have girls. Our girls watch what we do.
I'm very sure that we can tap into the Ubuntu philosophy here too.
Yes, so Ubuntu, let's go to it. Ubuntu is an African philosophy. It's at home in South Africa, but in mostly all African countries, just under different names. And it is one of the most democratic concepts in the whole world, one of the most mindful concepts in the whole world. It's actually very spiritual. In just one short sentence that even a kindergarten kid will understand. I am who I am because of you, or because of us. That simply means as beings, we are intricately interconnected. Our destinies are intricately interconnected with one another. And everything that we do affects the whole ecosystem that we live in, whether we know it or not. So if we know that we are intricately interconnected, and that what we do affects each other, we become mindful of the things that we do. Because even if we don't see the effects, it affects. And then that interconnectedness, look, we are speaking today through devices and internet. We may never meet the people who created this device, but using these devices connect us with them. And when we use them with respect, we are respecting those people. And so it is a concept that really grounds you and makes you understand that the kind of relationship that you build with others determine and shape who you become in future. And who you become is part of an ecosystem. You may say it doesn't affect me today, but it will affect your great-great-great-grandchildren somewhere, because they're in the ecosystem. And a very good example is the pandemic. The pandemic, they said it started in China. It didn't take long, and we all were in it. It didn't know rich or poor. It didn't know Africa or non-Africa. So that was our interconnectedness being, projected in front of us right there, what we call Ubuntu. Ubuntu has principles that you follow in order to be able to live a life of interconnectedness, to be able to tap into the power of your community. Because as Africans, we are community people. We are people's people.
Yes.
When you see Africans in Europe, they suffer most when they can't say hello to people. People don't greet. That becomes a big issue for them. They don't have that community around. Individualism is European. And that collectivity, that connectedness, that community, sense of community, sense of togetherness is African. And so that is in essence what Ubuntu is all about. So knowing it, I went out to create the Mindshift system. I call it the Mindshift system. Sometimes I call it suitcase when I'm traveling, because it is a tool. Quite a lot of people say, I am because we are. They don't know what it means. So I created a tool that has 3 pillars. It's a personal growth, collective growth concept. So the first pillar is knowing who you are. I am. It goes beyond your physical presence, people, and your accolades. It goes deep, 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 and show you how multifaceted and multiple layered you are as a human being. And that gives you points of connection. If you and I can connect because you say you're in Europe, I'm here, there's something, maybe motherhood connects us, maybe migration, the story of migration connects us, maybe, there's always something, but you have to know what you have in your envelope of I am who you are, in that suitcase. We are is about building relationships with others. And from the perspective of you knowing that you're multidimensional, knowing that you can always pick one button to connect with anybody in the world. Even the Nazi, I can pick one point. People who say we hate Africans, some of them are mothers. When I say as a mother, what are your aspirations for your children? And then they will see that we have the same aspiration. And if they're open, we can connect. That's already a door that is open. It's based on the fact that I know. So the third pillar is I am because we are. There you get principles to build mutually beneficial relationships.
Wow.
Be it private, be it social, or in your professional life. You being on earth and the things that you know and do are much bigger than you know. You are here to serve a much bigger good than you know. Then you become mindful, you become conscious, you become humble, you become intentional, you become intentional. That's the word. You become intentional in the things that you do, because you know it's about building a legacy. It's not about, you stand above your ego and you start seeing a much bigger picture. Yeah.
You left Austria, chose South Africa, stayed a while there, and then you've moved again to another African space, which is so beautiful, Sao Tome Principe. Now, sometimes people will now think, and people tell themselves, I even tell myself that, but thank God I'm not telling myself that again. Sometimes you tell yourself, it's too late to start again. I'm too old to redo this, to do this again, right? We come up with these excuses. How do you manage to say, now I'm done. Now I want something else. I want something more. I want to try again. And you move to a new country.
I'm doing a lot of healing. Writing has been very healing for me. And when you hear some of the wounds, you hear your fears. You hear the fear for judgment, for the fear of being judged. When you go through all of those, when you wake up every morning, you say, what is the next highest level? You quickly realize when you have, when your mission in a certain space is done. And during the pandemic, I realized that my mission in South Africa was complete. How do you know that? When you aspire for much more and that is not forthcoming, when you become more frustrated every day, and then you come again to the point where you think, okay, should I just give up and just go for what it is? And people will say, nah, yeah, it could be even better, it could be worse. And you mentioned comfort zone before. Sometimes we don't grow in our comfort zone. We don't. Sometimes your comfort zone becomes your dream killer. It becomes your mission killer. I have written so many books in South Africa. Now I wanted to do something else, and South Africa was not giving me that. And I wasn't going to settle for that. Mandela said, there is no point to be found settling for a life that is worth less than the one that you are worthy of. I told myself, I don't want to regret. When I do my healing and I start moving on, I don't want to have regrets. But also because I've seen how my children have excelled in my absence. My children, they've graduated from school, they are starting new missions. And I was like, I started writing books in South Africa when they were in secondary schools and that. Now they've graduated, they've gone to something bigger. I need another next big level. I need a bigger challenge.
You needed to graduate.
so Sao Tome came handy. And so I moved before I could even think. It's when I got here that I started going down on my knees and saying, so why am I here? What should I do here?
Oh, so does that mean that when you notice and you feel that urge, because I believe people listening now and watching will want to get some tips here and learn. So does that mean that when you feel the urge and you just go, take that step, don't think about what's going to happen, how is it not going to happen, just take the action, and then when you get to the mountain, climb the mountain?
Sometimes the fear of failure stops people from succeeding. You step on your way. Now, I must say, my children are grown up, and I was in South Africa all by myself. It's an easier decision for me to take than when I would have children, school children, and all of that.
Yes.
But still, if you feel like you're doing it, have an honest conversation with your children. Our children can be so understanding when we explain things to them.
That's true.
And sometimes you just have to leap and go try it. And if it doesn't work, you can always turn around. But I am the radical person. When I leave for good. When I left Austria, I gave away everything. My house, I left with 2 suitcases. When I left South Africa, I gave everything again away. But the universe has a way of providing. In Sao Tome, someone gave me a place to stay for 1 year. I did not have to pay rent.
Wow.
1 year, not even water bill, not even electricity. Yeah. And then when I moved around, people give me their hand-me-downs.
Yes.
So, and I take, and that's how you build relationships.
Yes.
When you come with all your stuff, it may not even fit. You're living behind that life because you were not happy with it anymore.
Yes.
And then you're bringing all the energy from there into your space.
Yes.
So let them all go. Take a leap of faith. Try it out. And if you're open and receptive to the totality of possibilities and opportunities, so much will happen.
It also sounds like a cleansing. It sounds like a cleansing process, like a cleansing journey for one's soul, actually, to be able to be content with just yourself, not all the material things that you think you might need. Then you realize you don't need it. You just need yourself, to be with yourself, to be with people, to be in a community. But this is an unconventional strategy, path, bravery. And this kind of bravery, definitely, I would imagine it comes with lots of criticism. Lots of, so much criticism. So my question to you is, how did you deal with this criticism, that you didn't let it get into your head and deviate you, take you away from your plan? And do you forgive yourself? Do you forgive these people? You know, how do you deal with it? Or maybe you didn't even have any criticism. Maybe the whole world was cheering for you. Maybe it was just you. But how did you have any, and how did you deal with it if you did?
If the whole world is cheering for you, you got to be very, very skeptical. Something is very, very wrong. You know, in my GloBUNTU concept, I have one tool that I call the relationship map.
Yes.
And in the relationship map, I map out people in my space.
Okay.
And I always make sure that I have 2 VIPs, maximum 3. VIPs are very irritating people. Not very important people. Why? Because I have my cheerleaders, I have my vision barriers, I have my stores, and the VIP are those people who will criticize you, who will tell you it's not working. And those are the people that give me adrenaline. I want to prove to them that it works. Also, they show you your blind spots. They are the people who will say, oh, no one has done this before. Or how do you think it's going to succeed? Or why will you leave your children behind? Or this is not, do you have an insurance? Do you have?
Yeah.
So when I hear them talk, when I go to them to learn. I put on what I call my researcher's mindset. My concept is called mind shift. So I'm constantly shifting my mind depending on who I'm dealing with, where I'm going to, what I want to hear, and what I want to take out of that, the lesson that I want to learn. So when I go to my VIP, I shift my mind to the space of a researcher. A researcher needs to find facts and need to share with people. So while they're talking, I'm in my mind is saying, take care of that. Have you checked that? Take care. I'm not even justifying to them, explaining,
oh my God.
And I'm just saying, they say this, have you checked that? Is that all right? Tick in my head and keep talking. No, you have to check that. That's a blind spot. Do some research there. I go to them in a researcher's mind. I come out with my solutions and things that I know that I have to work on.
This is a new way, new revolutionary approach to the naysayers. I've not heard about this approach. You hear so many different ways of how to, the naysayers do this, but this is so empowering and it's so loving. It shows so much compassion for yourself and for them. Thank you so much for sharing this. And
you're welcome.
Yes, and I know now that you are in this beautiful island and you're shaking, anywhere you go, you're shaking the place again. And I hear about what you're about to do, organize, and your vision and your mission there, what you want to achieve with the communities there. First of all, how is this place? How would you tell someone that's never been to Sao Tome, Principe, how does this place look like? How is life there compared to maybe South Africa or Austria?
There's no comparison. You can't compare. This place holds so much. Geographically speaking, it is the center of our planet. This is where you have the northern hemisphere cross the southern hemisphere. And so there's this small tiny island here. When you stand there, you're standing on the land of the equator. Your one foot is on the north and the one foot is on the south. You're standing on the point of 0, 0. And that's no other place in the world. This is where I'm talking about the center of our planet. That is number one. Number two, Sao Tome is a place that was used as a laboratory to disrupt our humanity forever. This is where the concept of enslavement was experimented, implemented on the African continent, and so it carries our trauma, but at the same time our history. It's the healing place. It's a place where you come to reconnect. It's a place where you come to heal. So Sao Tome and Principe is Africa's second smallest country. People are very, very chill, very relaxed, and very friendly. This is where like Ubuntu is here, humanity is here. It is also the place where people don't rush. You may say it's detrimental if you're used to the rush hours, and here it's like time stood still. Time stood still. There is no fast food chain. When you can buy your fabric and go to the tailor and get it sewn for you. There are no shopping malls. There are no fast food chains here. People cook food naturally. Everything is organic. So it's just the place to be if you have reached that point in your life where you're building a legacy, where you're no more looking for bling bling, because there's no bling bling here, where you're so grounded, or a place where you come to heal, you come to connect with your ancestors, with your soul, where you come to find yourself, to rejuvenate, to reboot. That is that place. And so there's so much that I could say about Sao Tome.
I can imagine.
We have retreats going on. So if people want to come here, join our retreats and just come here for a retreat and experience it for yourself. Life began in Africa, and we believe that healing the world will also happen in Africa. And we have a lot of medicinal plants around us that we want to leverage on, especially Afro-descendants wanting to return to the continent and not knowing where to go. Sao Tome is an absolute gateway back into the continent. It was used by the enslavers to take Africans out of the continent. We can use it to bring back the diaspora. Giving the safety and all that it is, using it as your step, the stepping stone, the gateway back to the continent is something that could be very, very interesting for African descendants.
Yes, I can imagine just listening to you and seeing how vibrant you are right now. It's enticing, it's luring. But I'm going to take you back to Austria for a second, because something I just listened to you now makes me ask the question that there's a new generation already there doing the work that you started. What advice would you give to a 20-something-year-old now in Europe that has anti-racism work going on, that has diversity work going on, that demands equality, that wants to be seen? What advice would you give them right now on how to go on that journey from your experience?
One thing would be, I will ask them, what is your vision? Just imagine everything is right and you don't have to fight for anything. Imagine everything was equal and you had it all. Who will you want to be? What will you want to do? I was pushed into becoming an anti-racism expert in Austria. I was pushed into becoming a diversity queen. I was pushed into so many things. I was reacting on my environment, on what the environment was throwing at me. And had I not left Austria, I would never have become the serial author that I am. I will still be doing anti-racism work. I will still be running about these things. And the environment makes you to become who you were not meant to be.
Oh my God.
In spite of that, you don't become that person. You're constantly justifying your presence and fighting to become who you think people think you should be, far away from who you really truly are and can be. So I touch the young generation. Yes, racism is there, but it's not your job. If you don't feel a calling for it, don't go into it.
Yes.
Do something else. Imagine Africa was never colonized. Imagine there was no enslavement, and we don't have to deal with all of this negativity. How great would we have been? So do not let the environment that you live in overshadow your greatness by pushing you into becoming a reactioner, becoming a reactor instead of a creator.
Yes.
When I went to South Africa and started doing my work, I realized I was born to be a creator. I could write books easily, very easily, but I had been made to become a fixer of a system that is not mine, and that was long done before I was born, and which will always be there. There is no way we can fix European systems. We can't, but we can fix ourselves. So I'll tell the young people, find your dream, go for it, do it. You don't have to become anti-racism expert. You were not born. It's not even a job description. You were not born with it.
Yes, and that is how, yes, yes. And I think actually just listen to what you're saying now. When we discover ourselves without being reactive to the environment, like we really just discover what we're passionate about, our vision, then we show up 100% for ourselves. And when we show up,
and we're happier.
Yes,
and we are happier.
We can live our greatness. And it's this collective greatness that actually reflects the African continent. And then it's a whole different story. Wow. What would you define as success now?
We are all successful in life. We are either successful in being unsuccessful, or we are successful in finding ways to be who we could truly be by tapping into our next masterpiece every day. So, and whichever way, it is in our hands to choose. And success, in many ways, is not having a big bank account. It may not be that. It's just for me doing the thing, waking up in the morning and saying, I'm glad I still got given a day, and saying, what is the next thing that I can do today? It's about doing things that matter to you, things that create a legacy, things that improve someone else's life, things that bring joy into your heart.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And when that brings money, it is fine. Sometimes some people's successes is just, in African country, we say being successful or rich is not about the amount of money that you have in your account. We see so many people in other cultures who have a lot of money, but they're totally unhappy. They're just young, they're just groaning everywhere and wallowing all the time. But riches in African sense is the number of people that you can call upon when you're in need. You are rich when there are people that you can call upon. If I don't have food to eat, I know I can call someone that can bring me food. If I don't have a bed to lie on, someone has. And when I tell you, people have been giving me their hand-me-down. I have things in the house that I did not even buy, in an environment that I just came into. That's what I call richness.
Wow.
And when there is money in the bank, it's fine. It doesn't mean don't go for money. It doesn't mean you shouldn't earn money. But when you become rich, when you discover people as richness, you may not have millions on your bank account, but you will never go hungry and you'll be happy. So please make money if it makes you happy, but also notice that if your work just makes people richer in your space, people you can call upon when you're in need. Some of us were not born to make big monies because we'll not know how to manage it anyway. It will make us unhappy. We were born to have lots of people around us who have the little that we can all share and be happy.
Yes, so, and money actually it's an idea that we created. Money is a tool to do stuff, to change. Exactly.
So much power to.
We can't really just build our values around a tool that's actually meant to help us. So I totally appreciate you defining and explaining what success could look like, and we're coming to the roundup. Could you share your favorite quote on resilience?
Oh, there are a couple of them. One is sometimes when things look like they're falling apart, they're actually falling in place. Another one, and this one comes from Wayne Dyer. He says, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change.
When we change the way we look at things, then
the
things
will
will
look
look at
change.
change. Wow.
So let me give you an example. If I was just looking about the fact that, look, this little brat that I told you about in the beginning, in the kindergarten,
Yes.
it pushed me to actually becoming a serial author. You know, when I changed the fact that she provoked me, she triggered me. And that triggering led me to wanting to know more, to find out, to find answers. And so I just changed the way. I could have said this little kid abused me. You know, I could say any other thing.
Yes.
But when we change the way we're looking at whatever situation, and we always say, and some people say there's always another side to the coin. That's almost the same thing.
Yes.
So when
how
we are
react.
That's right.
So we're in control of our reaction, not the action of the other.
That's right.
Yes.
And then another one is Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it is done.
Possible.
If you never try it, you'll never know how easy it was to get it done.
Now, having spent so much years on earth, share one of the most valuable lessons you've learned so far from your experience.
Is that my children are more, my children and the children in the world, they are more than we think that they can. They can take much more. And we, sometimes as parents, we have to sit back and let our children parent us. It's so enriching when we can do that. Sit back. It doesn't mean you're missing out on your authority. Just sit back and listen. Let the kids teach you. That's one of my biggest lessons.
If at this moment you had all the tools and the resources to do anything you desired, what would you do?
I will open up a school.
Thank you.
Open an African-centric school, and I will teach kids on how to embrace their African identity with pride so that they can stand tall all the time.
Thank you so much for this session. Thank you for being so bold in all the experiences that you've had and sharing it, for taking time and just being here and being open, willing to have this conversation, this very bold conversation. I personally have learned so much, and I'm so excited to share this with our audience. That was it. We've done it.
Thank you.